In a world where we wake up each morning and immediately begin comparing ourselves to others, scrolling through perfect lives on our phones, looking in the mirror and finding fault with what we see, there lives a profound truth that most of us have forgotten. A truth so simple, yet so transformative, that it can change everything about how we experience our daily existence. What if I told you that the very thing you dislike most about yourself might actually be your greatest gift? What if the qualities you spend so much energy trying to change or hide are exactly what make you uniquely valuable in this world? What if happiness isn't about becoming someone else, but about finally, truly, accepting who you already are? Today, I want to share with you an ancient story, a story that comes from the deepest wells of Buddhist wisdom, yet speaks directly to our modern struggles with self-doubt, comparison, and the endless pursuit of external validation. It's the story of a crow who thought he was the ugliest, most unwanted creature in the world, until one single tear changed everything. This isn't just a story about a bird. This is a story about you and me, about every person who has ever felt not good enough, not beautiful enough, not successful enough. It's about the journey from self-rejection to self-acceptance, from suffering to peace, from seeking happiness everywhere except where it actually lives. So settle in, take a deep breath, and let me take you on a journey that might just transform how you see yourself forever. Because sometimes the most profound teachings come wrapped in the simplest stories, and sometimes a single tear can open the door to a completely new way of being alive. Picture a quiet morning where the world seems to hold its breath. The sky is covered with soft gray clouds, and everything feels suspended in that gentle silence that comes just before dawn. High up in the branches of an old oak tree, bare and weathered by countless seasons, sits a crow. His black feathers don't shimmer like those of other birds. They don't catch the light in beautiful ways. Nobody stops to admire him. Nobody chooses him as a symbol of beauty or grace. And he knows this. Oh, how deeply he knows this. In Buddhism, we speak of the first noble truth, the reality of suffering that touches every living being. But there's a particular kind of suffering that we humans and this little crow share, the suffering that comes from rejecting ourselves. It's the pain of looking in the mirror, whether that mirror is made of glass or the reflection we see in others' eyes, and deciding that what we see is not enough. The crow sits there with his eyes lost in the horizon, carrying in his heart a sadness so deep it feels like it might swallow him whole. It's the weight of years spent feeling like he doesn't belong, years of comparing himself to every other creature, years of listening to that cruel inner voice that whispers constantly that he's not sufficient, not worthy, not lovable just as he is. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever looked at yourself and wondered why you couldn't be more like someone else? More beautiful, more talented, more successful, more anything other than exactly what you are. This is the suffering the Buddha spoke about, the suffering that comes not from external circumstances, but from our own minds, our own resistance to what is. The crow's heart carries this familiar ache, this sense of being rejected by the world simply for being who he is. Why can't I be like the elegant swan, he thinks to himself? Why can't I have the brilliant colors of the parrot? Why was I born a crow? Why this dark, ordinary, unremarkable form? And then something beautiful happens. A single tear forms in the crow's eye. Now, this isn't just any tear. This tear carries within it the accumulated weight of all his self-rejection, all his years of believing he wasn't good enough, all his longing to be different, to be better, to be worthy of love and admiration. In Buddhist teaching, we understand that our deepest suffering often becomes the very doorway to our awakening. The moments when we feel most broken, most hopeless, most convinced that we're fundamentally flawed, these are often the moments when transformation becomes possible. Because it's only when we truly feel the weight of our suffering that we become ready to look for another way. The tear falls slowly, carrying with it all the crow's pain and longing. He doesn't know it yet, but this single drop of suffering is about to change not only his destiny, but perhaps touch something deep within you as well. Because sometimes our greatest pain becomes our greatest teacher, and sometimes the very thing we're trying to escape becomes the key to our freedom. Below the tree, sitting in perfect stillness, is a monk deep in meditation. He represents something the crow has never encountered before, a presence that doesn't judge, that doesn't immediately categorize things as beautiful or ugly, worthy or unworthy. The monk simply is, present and open, like a calm lake that reflects everything without being disturbed by what it shows. The tear falls directly onto the monk's shoulder, interrupting his peaceful meditation. But instead of irritation, instead of brushing it away with annoyance, the monk looks up with eyes full of compassion. His gaze meets the crow's, and in that moment something shifts. It's as if the crow is being seen, truly seen, for the first time in his life. Not judged, not evaluated, not found wanting, but simply acknowledged with complete acceptance. This is the moment when suffering meets compassion, when rejection encounters unconditional love. The monk gently wipes the tear from his shoulder, and his face breaks into a tender smile. He doesn't say anything at first, because sometimes the most profound communication happens in silence. He simply extends his hand, as if inviting the crow to come closer, to trust that here, in this moment, he's safe from judgment. And so begins a story that will transform not only the crow, but perhaps transform you as well. Because when we finally encounter someone who sees us without conditions, who loves us without requirements, who accepts us without demands for change, everything becomes possible. Even a single tear falling from the heights of despair can become the seed of the most beautiful awakening. The crow, surprised by this gentle response, slowly descends from his high perch. Never before has anyone reacted to his presence with such kindness. He's grown accustomed to being shooed away, to being seen as a bad omen, a harbinger of misfortune. But this man radiates something different, something the crow has never encountered before: complete acceptance. When the crow settles on a lower branch, still cautious but drawn by this unusual warmth, the monk speaks with a voice as soft as morning mist. "Why do you cry, little friend?" he asks, and there's something in his tone that makes the crow feel safer than he's ever felt before. You see, in Buddhist practice, we call this the power of loving presence. When we truly listen to someone without judgment, without trying to fix them or change them, we create a sacred space where healing becomes possible. The monk isn't trying to solve the crow's problems or offer quick advice. He's simply offering the gift of being fully present with another being's pain. The crow hesitates. He's never spoken of his sadness before, never trusted anyone enough to share the deep ache in his heart. But something about the monk's energy makes him feel understood, as if someone is finally willing to hear him completely. "I am tired," the crow responds, his voice breaking with emotion. "Tired of always being the ugly one, the dark one, the ignored one. All the other birds are admired, loved, beautiful, and I am just a crow." The monk nods with deep understanding. He recognizes the suffering in these words, the pain that comes from what we call in Buddhism the comparing mind. This is one of the greatest sources of human suffering, this constant measuring of ourselves against others, this belief that happiness lies in being someone else. "And if you could be another bird," the monk asks gently, "one that you believe is happy, would you choose that?" The crow's eyes brighten with a flicker of hope. Could it really be possible? Could there be an escape from this prison of self-hatred he's lived in for so long? "Yes," he whispers, hardly daring to believe it might be true. The monk smiles with infinite compassion. "Yes, but first there is something you must do. Visit the birds you admire. Ask them if they are truly happy." Now, this might seem like a simple request, but what the monk is offering is actually one of the most profound practices in Buddhist teaching. He's inviting the crow to investigate reality directly, to look beyond appearances and discover the truth for himself. In Buddhism, we call this vichara, the practice of inquiry. Instead of simply believing our assumptions about how others live, we're invited to look deeper, to question our beliefs about where happiness actually comes from. The crow agrees eagerly, not knowing that he's about to embark on a journey that will transform not just his understanding of others, but his entire relationship with himself. Sometimes the greatest teachings come disguised as simple assignments, and sometimes the path to self-acceptance begins with truly seeing others as they really are. The crow takes flight with his heart beating faster than it has in years. For the first time in ages, he feels something that resembles hope. The possibility of becoming someone else, someone better, someone worthy of admiration, fills him with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. As he soars through the sky, he considers who to visit first. The choice comes easily. The swan, with his pristine white feathers and graceful movements, gliding across peaceful lakes while everyone stops to watch in wonder. Surely, if anyone in this world knows happiness, it must be the swan. He finds the swan floating serenely on a tranquil lake, surrounded by water lilies and bathed in golden sunlight. The scene is like something from a painting, perfect and peaceful. The crow approaches with deep respect and humility. "Excuse me, swan," he says quietly. "May I ask you something?" The swan turns with natural grace and nods kindly. "Of course, crow. What would you like to know?" "You are beautiful," the crow begins, his voice full of genuine admiration. "Everyone stops to watch you. You live in such peaceful surroundings. Tell me, are you happy?" Now here's where something unexpected happens. The swan's expression changes, and he lets out a deep sigh. In Buddhism, we understand that this is the moment when truth begins to emerge, when the masks we wear start to slip away, and we see reality as it actually is. "Happy," the swan repeats slowly, looking down at his reflection in the water. "Many people believe I am, but the truth is that I live with a quiet sadness that follows me everywhere." The crow is stunned. This wasn't the answer he expected at all. You see, the swan continues, everyone tells me I'm white, pure, elegant. But what if I don't want to be white? What if I long for color, for vibrancy, for the kind of joy that comes from being bright and cheerful? I've spent my whole life envying the parrots with their festival of colors, their apparent happiness, their ability to bring smiles to everyone who sees them. I too wish I could be like them. The crow sits in complete silence, his mind reeling. Here was the very bird he had always assumed was the epitome of happiness. And yet the swan was suffering from exactly the same kind of longing, the same grass is greener thinking that had been torturing the crow himself. This is what the Buddha called the second noble truth, the understanding that suffering comes from craving, from constantly wanting things to be different than they are. The swan's pristine beauty hadn't protected him from the universal human tendency to believe that happiness exists somewhere else, in some other form, in some other way of being. The crow's first assumption about where happiness lies has just been completely shattered. But rather than giving up, he feels even more determined to find someone who has figured out the secret to contentment. The crow leaves the swan with his mind spinning. Everything he thought he knew about happiness is starting to crumble. But surely the parrot must be different. With his explosion of colors, his playful nature, his ability to make everyone laugh and smile, how could the parrot be anything but blissfully happy? He flies toward the tropical forest, where the trees grow tall and thick, creating a canopy of green that filters the sunlight into dancing patterns. There, among the branches, he finds the parrot, his feathers a magnificent display of red, blue, yellow, and green. The bird is playing with his own reflection in a small pool of water, and his very presence seems to radiate joy and vitality. "Hello, parrot," the crow calls out, approaching carefully. "I wonder if I might ask you something." The parrot turns his head with characteristic curiosity, his bright eyes sparkling with intelligence. "Of course, crow. What would you like to know? I've been traveling looking for the happiest bird in the world. Many say that you are that bird. You're so admired, so colorful, so full of life. Tell me, is it true? Are you happy?" The parrot's response begins with a laugh, but it's not the joyful sound the crow expected. Instead, there's something hollow in it, something that speaks of pain hidden beneath the bright exterior. "Happy," the parrot says, tilting his head thoughtfully. "Sometimes I am, yes. But the truth is, I live with a fear that never leaves me. Do you know what it's like to be so beautiful that humans want to capture you? To be so prized that your very gifts become a danger to your freedom?" The crow had never considered this possibility. He had always seen the parrot's colors as pure blessing, never imagining they could be a curse. "Many of my kind have been taken from their families, locked in cages, turned into living decorations for human homes. They steal our freedom just so they can admire our colors. I spend my days hiding, always alert, always afraid. I can never fully relax, never completely enjoy the gift of flight because I know that my beauty makes me a target." The parrot's voice grows quieter, more vulnerable. "If I could choose, I would be a bird like you, crow. Free to fly anywhere without being hunted, able to live my life without fear. Your dark feathers are like a cloak of invisibility that protects you from the dangers that my colors bring." The crow feels something shift inside his chest. Here is the parrot, the very bird he had envied for his vibrant appearance, wishing he could have the crow's plain, unremarkable feathers. The parrot was longing for exactly what the crow had always despised about himself. This is a profound moment of understanding. In Buddhism, we call this the recognition of interdependence, the realization that everyone's experience is connected, that what we see as our disadvantages might actually be our hidden strengths, and what we envy in others might be the very thing that causes them suffering. The crow is beginning to see that his assumptions about happiness, about what makes life worth living, might be completely wrong. But he has one more bird to visit, one more chance to find the secret to perfect contentment. The crow flies away from the parrot in thoughtful silence. Each conversation is dismantling his beliefs about where happiness lives, but he still holds onto one last hope. Surely the peacock, with his magnificent tail feathers that spread like a living work of art, must be the happiest creature of all. He remembers seeing the peacock once in a royal garden, surrounded by crowds of people taking photographs, artists trying to capture his beauty, children laughing with delight at the spectacular display of his plumage. His feathers were like a masterpiece painted in blues and greens and gold, each one perfect, each one adding to an overall effect that took everyone's breath away. He must be the happiest of all, the crow thinks to himself as he flies toward that royal garden. Everyone loves him. How could he not be overflowing with joy? When he arrives, the scene is exactly as he remembered. The peacock stands in the center of a beautiful garden, his tail feathers fanned out in their full glory. Children point and giggle, adults snap photos, and artists sketch frantically, trying to capture even a fraction of his magnificence. But as the crow watches more carefully, he begins to notice something that doesn't quite fit with his expectations. Behind all that stunning beauty, there's something in the peacock's eyes that looks tired, something that seems almost resigned. The crow waits patiently until the crowds disperse and the garden grows quiet before approaching. "Peacock," he says respectfully, "may I speak with you for a moment?" The peacock nods with elegant grace, but there's a weariness in his movement that the crow hadn't noticed when he was performing for the crowds. "You are admired by everyone," the crow begins. "Your beauty is beyond compare. Surely you must be the happiest bird in the world." The peacock closes his eyes for a moment, as if the question itself causes him pain. When he opens them again, there's a sadness there that pierces the crow's heart. "I was happy once," the peacock says quietly, "before I became a prisoner of my own beauty." He gestures with one wing toward the golden bars that the crow suddenly notices surrounding the garden. In his excitement to find happiness, he had missed the most important detail of all. The peacock isn't free. He's trapped, kept like a living ornament for others to admire. "These feathers that everyone loves so much," the peacock continues, "they gave me fame, but they also took away my freedom. I can no longer fly like you do. I live trapped, always on display, always being looked at, desired, photographed, but never truly seen or understood. What I want more than anything is your open sky, your ability to go wherever you choose, whenever you choose." The crow stares at the peacock in complete amazement. Here is the bird he had always considered the most blessed, the most fortunate, and yet he too is suffering. Not only suffering, but longing for the very thing the crow had always taken for granted: his freedom. "You don't understand what a gift you have," the peacock says, looking up at the vast sky above them. "You can fly anywhere, sleep anywhere, live anywhere. You belong to no one but yourself. That is the greatest treasure of all." In this moment, something profound awakens in the crow's consciousness. He suddenly sees that every single bird he has visited is trapped in the same cycle of suffering he has known all his life. Each one believes that happiness lies in being someone else, having something else, living some other kind of life. The swan wants colors, the parrot wants safety, the peacock wants freedom, and he, the crow, had wanted everything they had. But now he sees the truth that the monk had been guiding him toward all along. The grass isn't greener on the other side. Everyone is struggling with the same fundamental misunderstanding about where happiness actually comes from. And he, the crow, has been blessed with something that each of these supposedly happier birds desperately craves: complete freedom. For the first time in his life, the crow doesn't want to be someone else. He wants to go home, to return to the wise monk, to share this incredible discovery that has just transformed his entire understanding of life itself. The crow stays with the peacock for a few more moments, both of them sitting in a silence that speaks volumes. It's not an uncomfortable silence, but one filled with understanding, with the recognition that they are both part of something much larger than their individual struggles. The crow feels something he has never experienced before: a deep compassion, not just for himself, but for every living being who has ever felt trapped by their own circumstances. As he finally takes flight from the royal garden, something extraordinary happens within him. The very act of flying feels completely different now. Before, when he flew, it was usually to escape something: the judgment of others, his own painful thoughts, the weight of his loneliness. But now, as his wings carry him across valleys and rivers, over mountains and forests, he's not running away from anything. He's flying toward something. He's flying toward home, toward understanding, toward the most important conversation of his life. In Buddhist teaching, we call this the moment of vipassana, of clear seeing. It's when the fog of confusion suddenly lifts, and we see reality as it actually is, not as we've been imagining it to be. The crow is experiencing this profound shift in perception. All of his old beliefs about happiness, about worth, about what makes life valuable, are dissolving like morning mist in the sunlight. During this flight home, something beautiful happens in his mind. He begins to understand that everyone he met was suffering from the exact same delusion he had been living with for years. The swan, the parrot, the peacock, himself, they were all caught in what the Buddha called the trap of comparison, the prison of believing that contentment exists somewhere outside of their present experience. But there's something else dawning in the crow's awareness, something even more profound. He's beginning to see that he actually possesses what each of those beautiful birds was desperately seeking. The swan wanted joy and vibrancy, but the crow has the freedom to find joy anywhere he chooses. The parrot wanted safety and peace, but the crow lives without fear, without being hunted for his appearance. The peacock wanted liberty, and the crow has always been completely free. As he flies through the sky that he has always taken for granted, the crow realizes he has been living surrounded by treasures he never recognized. His ordinary black feathers aren't a punishment. They're a gift of invisibility that allows him to go anywhere safely. His unremarkable appearance isn't a curse. It's a freedom from the burden of constant attention. His simple life isn't something to escape from. It's something to celebrate. This is what we call in Buddhism the third noble truth, the understanding that suffering can end, that peace is possible, that happiness doesn't have to be pursued because it's already present when we stop rejecting what is. The crow is discovering that he doesn't need to become someone else to be happy. He just needs to stop believing that who he is isn't enough. When the crow arrives back at the sacred tree where his journey began, the sun is beginning to set, painting the sky in warm shades of gold and orange. There, exactly as he left him, sits the monk, still in meditation, as if time itself has been waiting for this moment of return. The crow descends gently and settles near the monk, but this time there are no tears in his eyes. Instead, there's a calm presence about him, a stillness that comes from deep understanding. He looks like someone who has traveled far and learned much, someone who has found what he was searching for in the last place he thought to look, within himself. The monk slowly opens his eyes and looks at the crow with infinite tenderness. There's knowing in his gaze, as if he has been aware all along of the journey the crow needed to take and the discoveries he needed to make. "Crow," the monk says gently, "you have returned. Tell me, what did you discover?" The crow takes a deep breath, as if he's releasing all the weight he has carried for so long. "I went searching for happiness, believing I would find it in other bodies, in other lives. But I discovered that everyone suffers. The swan wants colors, the parrot fears losing his freedom, and the peacock lives trapped by his very beauty. None of them is completely happy. All of them want what they don't have." He pauses and looks up at the vast sky above them, the sky that has always been his home, his playground, his sanctuary. "And I have something that each of them desperately wishes for. I have freedom, safety, and the ability to live life exactly as it is. I'm not perfect, but for the first time I'm at peace with being a crow." The monk smiles without saying a word, because he understands that true teaching has taken place, not through lectures or instructions, but through direct experience, through the kind of learning that can only happen when we investigate reality for ourselves. In Buddhism, we call this the middle way, the path that leads neither to indulgence nor to self-punishment, but to acceptance of what is. The crow has discovered this path through his own journey, through his own willingness to look beyond appearances and see the truth that lies beneath. "What you have discovered," the monk finally says, his voice soft as evening breeze, "cannot be taught with words alone. It can only be understood through the journey itself. You spent so much time wishing to be someone else that you forgot to appreciate everything you already had. You saw yourself as a shadow among others, but the truth is, you never lacked value. You simply never gave yourself the chance to see your own worth." The crow nods, understanding flooding through him like warm sunlight. "I was so busy looking at what I didn't have that I was blind to what I did have. I was so focused on being rejected that I rejected myself first." The greatest prison, the monk continues, is not made of bars or walls. It's made of thoughts that tell us we're not enough, thoughts that insist happiness lives somewhere else, in someone else's life, in someone else's body, in someone else's circumstances. Something wonderful happens then. The crow looks at his wings, these same black wings he has despised for so long, and instead of seeing them as inadequate, he sees them as miraculous. These wings have carried him to distant places, have shown him truths that have transformed his life, have given him the very freedom that others pray for. He doesn't need bright colors or elegant grace or magnificent plumage. He just needs to appreciate what he has been given, to stop demanding that life be different than it is, to find peace with his own unique place in the vast tapestry of existence. With this realization flooding through him, the crow extends his wings and takes flight. But this time, it's completely different from every flight he has taken before. He's not flying to escape something or to search for something or to prove something. He's flying simply because he can, simply because it brings him joy, simply because he is free. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of liberation. It's not about changing our circumstances or becoming someone else. It's about changing our relationship with what already is. It's about finding freedom not from our conditions, but within our conditions. As the crow soars through the golden evening sky, every movement of his wings is a celebration. Every current of air that lifts him higher is a gift he has never fully appreciated before. The wind that ruffles his dark feathers feels like a blessing, like the earth itself is welcoming him home to his own life. He flies without destination, not because he's lost, but because he doesn't need to arrive anywhere to feel complete. The sky that once seemed indifferent to his presence now feels like it's smiling at him with every ray of sunlight that touches his wings. He is exactly where he belongs, being exactly who he is, and for the first time in his life, that is enough. More than enough. It's perfect. In this moment, the crow understands what the monk meant when he said that those who accept their nature stop seeking happiness and start living in it. He's not pursuing contentment anymore because he's realized he never lost it. He was just looking for it in all the wrong places. The freedom he feels now isn't just physical freedom of flight. It's the deeper freedom that comes from self-acceptance, from the end of the war against himself, from the profound peace of no longer needing to be anyone other than who he already is. As he flies, he remembers the monk's words echoing in his heart. Those who accept their nature stop seeking happiness and start living in it. And he knows with absolute certainty that he will never again take for granted the miracle of being exactly, perfectly, completely himself. As the crow continues his liberated flight through the evening sky, something draws his attention below. There, perched on a cluster of rocky outcrops, is a group of crows, his own kind, gathered together as they often do when the day begins to fade. For the first time in his life, the sight of other crows doesn't fill him with shame or the urge to hide. Instead, he feels something completely new, a gentle pull of connection, a desire to share rather than to escape. He descends slowly, gracefully, and as he lands among them, something beautiful happens. The other crows look at him with the same casual indifference they always have, but this time, he doesn't interpret their lack of special attention as rejection. He simply sees it as acceptance, as the natural ease of being among his own kind. In Buddhism, we understand that when someone truly awakens to their own nature, when they find genuine peace with themselves, they naturally become a source of light for others. not because they're trying to teach or preach or convince anyone of anything, but simply because their presence carries a different quality, a sense of freedom that others can feel even if they can't immediately understand it. One of the crows notices something different about him and asks, "Where have you been? You seem, I don't know, somehow different." The crow, who has just returned from his journey, looks around at these familiar faces, these beings who share his same dark feathers, his same simple appearance, his same ordinary crow life, and he feels nothing but warmth and kinship. "I've been flying," he says with a gentle smile in his voice, searching for answers and finding peace. He settles comfortably among them, not to prove anything or to show off his newfound wisdom, but simply to share. And as the sun continues its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in deeper shades of gold and purple, he begins to tell his story. He speaks of the swan who longed for colors he didn't have, of the parrot who lived in fear of his own beauty, of the peacock trapped by the very magnificence that everyone admired. He tells them about the monk whose compassion opened doorways he didn't know existed, and about the journey that taught him to see his own life with completely new eyes. As he speaks, something extraordinary happens. The other crows listen with a quality of attention they've never given to anything before. They hear in his words not just a story, but a reflection of their own struggles, their own hidden pain, their own secret wishes to be something other than what they are. This is the power of authentic sharing in Buddhism. When someone speaks from genuine realization, from real transformation, their words carry a vibration that touches something deep in others. They're not preaching or lecturing or trying to convince. They're simply offering the gift of their own experience, and that gift has the power to awaken recognition in other hearts. As the crow continues his story, he notices that some of his listeners have tears in their eyes. Others are nodding with the kind of understanding that comes from recognizing your own truth in someone else's words. A few are simply sitting in quiet contemplation, as if something inside them is shifting, softening, opening to new possibilities. When he finishes speaking, a profound silence settles over the group. It's not the silence of confusion or boredom, but the silence of deep recognition, of truth being absorbed into hearts that have been waiting to hear it. Each crow sitting there has seen themselves reflected in some part of the story, has felt their own comparing mind, their own self-rejection, their own longing to be anywhere but here, anyone but themselves. In that beautiful silence, something shifts in the entire group of crows. For just a moment, they all stop wishing they were different. They stop envying the birds with brighter feathers or more graceful movements or more admired songs. They simply rest in the peace of being exactly what they are, where they are, when they are. This is what happens when wisdom is shared authentically. It doesn't create dependency or hierarchy. Instead, it awakens the same potential for peace and self-acceptance that exists within every being. The crow who went on the journey doesn't become a guru or a teacher in the conventional sense. He simply becomes a reminder that transformation is possible, that suffering is optional, that peace is always available when we stop fighting with reality. As the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, the crow who has traveled so far looks up at the vast expanse above them. The same sky that used to feel indifferent now feels like home, like an infinite embrace that has always been holding him, supporting him, loving him exactly as he is. He no longer needs applause or recognition or admiration. He doesn't need to be the most beautiful or the most talented or the most anything. He just needs to be present, to be grateful, to be alive in this moment, in this body, in this simple, perfect, ordinary crow life. And in that moment of complete acceptance, he whispers something that sounds like a prayer, like a song of gratitude to the universe itself. Thank you for this body, these wings, this life. I wouldn't change anything. Not a single feather, not a single moment, not a single experience that brought me to this understanding. This is the ultimate teaching of Buddhism, this profound gratitude for life exactly as it is. Not because life is always easy or pleasant or exactly what we might have chosen, but because when we stop fighting with what is, we discover that what is has always been enough, more than enough. It's been perfect all along, waiting patiently for us to see it clearly. The crow closes his eyes, not to escape from his reality, but to rest more deeply into it. He sleeps the sleep of someone who has finally come home to themselves, someone who has discovered that the treasure they were seeking was never lost, never absent, never anywhere but right here, right now, in the very life they had been so eager to escape. And as he drifts into peaceful sleep, surrounded by his fellow crows under the starlit sky, he carries within his heart the deepest truth of all. When we truly accept ourselves, we become a gift to everyone around us. When we find peace with our own nature, we naturally inspire others to find that same peace. When we stop running from who we are, we discover that who we are has always been exactly who the world needed us to be. This is how one being's journey from self-rejection to self-acceptance becomes a light that illuminates the path for countless others. This is how a single tear of suffering transforms into an ocean of compassion. This is how the simplest truth becomes the most profound teaching. You are already enough, you have always been enough, and you will always be enough, exactly as you are. And so we come to the end of our story, but perhaps this is where your own story truly begins. The crow's journey from self-rejection to self-acceptance isn't just a tale about a bird learning to appreciate his dark feathers. It's a mirror reflecting back to us our own deepest struggles and our own greatest possibilities. How many times have you looked at your life and wished you were someone else? How often have you scrolled through social media, comparing your inner reality to everyone else's highlight reel, feeling like you're the only one who hasn't figured out the secret to happiness? How many moments have you spent believing that contentment exists everywhere except in your own experience, in your own skin, in your own perfectly imperfect human existence? The beautiful truth that the crow discovered is the same truth that awaits each of us. Every single person you admire, every single life you envy, every single situation you think would make you happier, comes with its own challenges, its own fears, its own hidden sorrows. The grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greenest where you water it, where you tend it, where you learn to appreciate it exactly as it grows. This doesn't mean we stop growing or learning or improving ourselves. It means we stop believing that our worth depends on being different than we are. It means we discover that happiness isn't a destination we arrive at by changing everything about ourselves. It's a way of traveling, a way of being present with life as it unfolds, a way of saying yes to this moment, this breath, this perfectly ordinary and extraordinary experience of being alive. The swan in our story was beautiful, but longed for colors he didn't have. How often do we focus so intensely on what we lack that we become blind to what we possess? The parrot was vibrant and joyful, but lived in constant fear of losing his freedom. How many of us spend so much energy protecting what we have that we forget to enjoy it? The peacock was magnificent, but trapped by his own splendor. How often does our need for external validation become the very thing that imprisons us? But the crow, the ordinary crow, had something that each of these seemingly blessed creatures desperately wanted. He had freedom. He had safety. He had the ability to move through the world without being hunted or caged or turned into someone else's decoration. And yet, he almost missed these gifts entirely because he was so focused on what he didn't have. This is the heart of Buddhist wisdom. This understanding that suffering comes not from our circumstances, but from our resistance to our circumstances. When we constantly compare ourselves to others, we're essentially saying that reality got it wrong, that the universe made a mistake when it created us as we are. But what if the universe knew exactly what it was doing? What if your particular combination of strengths and struggles, gifts and challenges, is precisely what this world needs? What if your sensitivity that you see as weakness is actually the very thing that allows you to understand others' pain? What if your ordinariness that you see as boring is actually the foundation for a life of genuine peace? What if your struggles that you see as evidence of failure are actually the experiences that develop your compassion and wisdom? The monk in our story didn't offer the crow magic or transformation into something else. He offered something far more powerful, the invitation to see clearly, to investigate reality directly, to discover through his own experience where happiness actually comes from. This is the gift that life offers each of us every single day. Not the promise that we can become someone else, but the possibility that we can finally, truly accept who we already are. When you stop seeking happiness elsewhere, you realize you were never separate from it. When you stop running from yourself, you discover that yourself is exactly who you came here to be. When you stop comparing your inside to everyone else's outside, you find the peace that was always waiting patiently in your own heart. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, as you transition from the busyness of your day into the quiet of rest, I invite you to be like the crow at the end of his journey. Look at your life, your body, your circumstances, your challenges, your gifts, and see if you can find even a small space of gratitude for exactly what is. You don't have to love everything about your life to find peace with it. You don't have to think you're perfect to stop wishing you were someone else. You just have to be willing to consider the possibility that you are already enough, that you have always been enough, that the very things you think disqualify you from happiness might actually be your hidden qualifications for joy. Rest now in the peace of being exactly who you are. Let go of the exhausting work of trying to be someone else. Trust that your life, as ordinary or extraordinary as it may seem, is unfolding exactly as it needs to. And remember, like the crow flying freely through his beloved sky, you too have wings you may have forgotten how to appreciate. You too have a freedom you may have forgotten how to celebrate. You too have a life that is already in this very moment more than enough. Sweet dreams, dear friend. May you wake tomorrow with the crow's newfound eyes, seeing your own life as the miracle it has always been.